Okay. Morning to all of you. Thank you. I am very honored to have the opportunity of have this exchange with you, which I believe is not going to be, and it's a true exchange. It's going to be in both directions. It's not going to be only in one direction. I have been studying in the Cuban Research Institute at FIU, the Cuban diaspora in particular. And as such, I have been enhancing the area of my studies to other diasporas in some sort of comparative studies. And one thing that I believe is very important for anybody who's interested in understanding what's going on with immigrant communities in the United States and their relationship with their countries of origin is to get in touch with the people that have long roots in that community, and those are the teachers. My first job in Cuba, I come from Cuba, I am an immigrant myself. I went first to Canada, I came recently to the United States, was as a high school professor. So I very much understand the kind of challenges that a professor have in their daily life, the kind of questions that are posed by communities through their children to those professors. And in a certain degree, or to a certain degree, those challenges have a lot to do with the problems that they left back home. When somebody leaves their home country and goes to another place looking for a better life, looking for a better income, they leave behind families that they care for, families that they have to sustain. It's not only the challenge of integrating themselves successfully in the society where they are arriving to, it's also how to handle the situation of those dear persons that they left behind. And that's why I invited my colleague from Miami-Dade College to come here today too, because here I would like to engage in this conversation with all of you about the challenges that an immigrant has in this country when they arrive in order to successfully integrate to American society, but the challenges that they also bring with them in terms of the country that they left behind, in terms of the families that they left behind, and how they have to handle that too. So let me go through a number of things that, in the academia they are discussing about these issues, and then I would like to take your opinion on them. Let me see if I can handle this. I'm not very good at technology. Oh, here we are. Okay, if I would ask this room, for all of you to raise your hands if you are an immigrant or an immigrant descendant, let's do that. I am an immigrant. How many of you are immigrants? How many of you are immigrants' descendants too? There you go. Okay, that is what we have here. The second most populated county in the United States by immigrants is Miami-Dade County, after LA in California. That means that the issues of immigrants are quite on top of the agenda of the families that send their children to your schools. And they are not only, the top of the end in terms of the country where they have arrived, the country that they left behind, the problems of their families, the problems of their friends, they're also very much in their minds. And that's something that you have to deal with, because that reflects in the children that you're going to be looking after in your schools. Now, let me go through this very quickly. If I talk about a diaspora, what does that mean? Because we are always talking about immigrant communities. Well, diaspora at the beginning was a term that was linked to the forceful exodus of major portions of a population, forced by slavery, for example, in the case of Africa, forced by persecution in the case of the Jews, forced later on by other circumstances, wars, repression, and so on and so forth. But right now, in this global world with this incredible back and forth movement of people, ideas, and economic transactions, what we're seeing is that there are certain populations that have become, certain nations that have become transnational because they have a significant portion of their nationals outside of the country. But it's not like before. It's not like when my parents left Spain and went to Cuba. At that time, they left in a ship when they were 12 years old, and they almost couldn't communicate with the people they left behind. Communication was very sporadic. It was not very clear in their minds if they would ever see their country again. Now it's different. Now you have internet, you have Skype, you can see the face of the other person you're talking to. Of course, you have phone calls that are much cheaper than in the past, and certainly there is a phone system. Before, in the time of my parents, there wasn't. You would depend on letters that would be sent by ship and everything else. So diasporas today are these major segments of populations that have left their country but keep in touch with their country through many avenues. They keep updated about what's going on. They keep looking back about events in their countries. They talk about it. Ask me, if you go to Calle Ocho, that's the only thing they talk about. Cuba, Cuba, Cuba. Besides the pastelitos of guayaba and the rest. And it's in the back of the mind of almost everybody that have left the country, particularly if you have left on the conditions in which you would have preferred to stay, but, either because of politics or economics or, social violence, you decided that you have to leave and try to help whoever you left behind. So today, the definition would be that diasporas are these ethnic communities of migrants that are residing in one country, but keep strong, fluent links and relations with their countries of origin. Now, most of the time we think about migrants as poor people, as victims, and they are victimized in many ways. No question about it. There's discrimination. It's not easy to integrate yourself when you land in another country, sometimes with even totally different culture, different language. But diasporas, some diasporas more than others, true, but in general, they have certain resources. They have three types of capital. They have economic capital, even if individually a certain family income in the United States, for example, an immigrant family, is very low, they still send money back home. Even the poorest family do their best to send at least $20, $50, whatever they can, back to their relatives. And interestingly enough, today that's more than $300 billion of what they call now migrant dollars, of the money that people are sending back home to their relatives, to their hometowns, to friends, to help them out. So some people are entrepreneurs. They have money. They were successful, and they now have a large amount of money here, or resources, or enterprises, businesses. Others don't, but still, the amount of money that little by little everybody's sending back home counts, and counts a lot in certain countries, like El Salvador, like Mexico, like India. I mean, in those countries, the percentage of the money that comes in as remittances from the immigrants that migrated abroad to another place, sometimes is more than 10–15% of the whole wealth of that country in 1 year, of the GDP. And that's a lot of money. The other thing that they have is human capital, which sometimes is wasted. Sometimes is wasted in the country that they left behind, and that's why they leave, because they believe that their talent is not really being acknowledged, recognized, or that they don't have a promising profession in front of them, because let's say you're a scientist and there are not good high-tech labs in your country. You want to migrate to a developed country and work in the field that you were trained. But there are also other kinds of human capital, other kinds of profession. Some people are doctors, some people are nurses, some people are businessmen or businesswomen that left their country and have the skills and knack for conducting business abroad. And they have all sorts of skills. Plumbers, carpenters, teachers, you name it. That's a capital that has left the country. We'll go back to that later. The country where they were born. That's a capital flight, you can say. Human capital flight that left the country where they were born and goes to another place. But that capital is still in their minds. And it's something that even if you live in a country, for example, like Cuba, in Cuba, when you are going to leave the country and they stamp they don't give you a permit to leave abroad for temporarily or whatever, and they stamp a seal on your passport saying you are abandoned the country forever, salida permanente del país, they confiscate everything you have, right? But they can't confiscate your knowledge. That's something you bring with you wherever you go. And that's what helps you to start a new life in another place, provided that you find the avenues in the new society where you're arriving that facilitates your integration. Sometimes that kind of knowledge is wasted. I lived for about 12 years in Canada. One of the problems that Canada has is that it's very generous and open for migrants. It welcomes a lot of migrants from all over the world. But then, interestingly enough, the unions have a lot of protective, let's say, measures to protect the labor market, to make sure that Canadians would have a better chance than somebody who's an arrival from abroad. And in those cases, the first thing that you go to ask for a job, almost on anything, even as a carpenter, and they would ask you, okay, you have to tell me what is your Canadian experience, which is funny. I said, well, I went to, I passed my first winter or something like that. That's a Canadian experience, believe me. And but it's hard. It's hard in some places to start over again. You have to reinvent yourself again. You have to have luck. I mean, no question about it. Luck plays a big deal in this thing. The other thing is social capital. What is social capital? It is your network. I mean, now we understand it better because of Facebook. It is your network of friends. All the people that eventually you have their addresses, their phones, that you have some sort of relation with them in the past, and that you believe that eventually you can, make a phone call and tell them, you know what, I left my country, I have arrived here, I need some help. Can you give me some sort of orientation, at least? Do you have any advice to give me? Where should I go? What kind of programs are available in this country for migrants? Do you know if there are any openings available for somebody like me? Well, that's your social capital. Again, when I left Cuba, I only left with one bag, with a little bit of clothes. But I had a lot of capital in one phone book. And that was the phone book that helped me to start all over again. Because when I got into Canada, I didn't have a penny, but I got a good bunch of phone numbers that I could make phone calls, and very good friends that immediately, when they knew I was there, tried to help me out. But you don't have to come from, in this kind of traumatic kind of migration. You can come from any other country. And still, your social network is important. And when you arrive to the new country, if there is a significant, let's say, well, if you are, I don't know, a Haitian, and you go to Denver, well, I don't know how many Haitians will be in Denver. I haven't checked out the statistics, but I can bet that there will be fewer than in Miami. So your social network in Denver will be very limited. Your social capital in Denver, if you're a Haitian, will be very limited. But if you have come to Miami and you can insert yourself in the network that already exists here, you can go around and ask for advice. You can say, hey, where should I go? Can I go to, I have heard that there are programs in Miami-Dade College for Haitians to get some sort of skills and training and get trained in English as second language. And all that is also very helpful. So, summarizing, the migrants that go from one country to another eventually bring with them three types of capital: economic, human, in terms of knowledge, and then social. Okay, there is a lot of new interest now on us. Everybody's talking about the diasporas. Madame Hillary Clinton have started a program at the State Department on diasporas. In London, they also have a new interest in diasporas. Why is that? Well, first of all, they have discovered recently that the diasporas move a lot of money internationally, as I said before, billions of dollars. 215 million international migrants sent in 2010 $325 billion from North to South countries. That's a lot of money. And they're interested in that. Of course, the banks immediately are jumping on it. So how can we make some money out of that? I mean, how can we, be the channel of this movement? The other thing is that some people are discovering that some diasporas, at least, are more influential than others, but they are politically influential simply out of their number. Can you imagine the Mexicans in this country and their vote when it's an electoral year? Everybody's paying attention to that. How many Latinos, how many Hispanics? I mean, how would they vote? The political parties are interested in that. So there is, again, a new interest in studying diasporas. Now, a third one is that the people that work in international development and international cooperation, they are discovering that the diasporas, as is said here, move more money to assist their families and hometowns than all the money that all international cooperation agencies in the world are given to the third world, to the developing countries. And they're interested in that too. I mean, can this be a force to somehow develop, assist in development, besides simply assisting in daily survival? Because when you break down, we'll go into that later, when you break down the kind of use that the recipients of remittances make of the money that is sent from abroad, most of it, it doesn't go to investment, doesn't go to savings, it goes to surviving. It goes to buying food, paying for medicines, basics. But the question is there another way to go? Is there a way to help them out to use the money in such a way that increasingly and gradually they will become even more dependent, less dependent from those remittances? If some of that money can be successfully, quote unquote, successfully used to, for example, open micro enterprises or medium enterprises, can perhaps in the future these relatives that the migrants left back in their countries be self-reliant and do not have to depend as much on the money that is being sent to them from abroad? Those are the questions that the academia and the people that work in international cooperation agencies are dealing with. One thing that I think they are discovering little by little is that you cannot either coerce or push the diasporas into behaving in a certain way out of patriotic calls, saying, it's your country, you have to save it, you have to help it out. Because the people that we're talking about are not millionaires. They're workers, most of them, that earn their bucks the very hard way. And they are not there to save the country, they're there to save their families. But there might be a connection if, with some creativity and innovation, you can in some way assist those relatives back in those countries to use the money in such a way that they can prosper by startup businesses and so on. Businesses, by the way, in which their relatives in the diaspora can also eventually participate. And then there is an incentive in terms of looking after the families, but also eventually an incentive in making some money out of it. I would excuse myself if I go back to Cuba, because this is obviously the case I'm more familiar with, because I just coordinated a project of research on the Cuban diaspora. The Cuban diaspora and Cuba, so much for the embargo, they are moving $3 billion almost a year between remittances, packages, paying for cell phones, and a number of other different kind of economic transactions. And despite the embargo, there are interesting creative things that families are doing. For example, there are people that are renting a room in their house to tourists. Well, they don't have access to the internet. How is a tourist going to find out that they're renting that room? Well, they have an uncle here, and that uncle will put it up in the internet and will do the marketing. So we're talking here about a market in the stretch of Florida that is informal, is not structured, is invisible, and is fragmented. One part of the market is in the island, the other part of the market is here. They produce a service over there, and the service is marketed over here. And then there is the other way around. You have a barbershop in Cuba, and the person in the barbershop, the barber, probably a new barber, God forbid that I have to cut my hair with him until they learn. There are many people with a lot of initiative, that doesn't mean that they really know the new skills that they are starting. Well, the guy needs, let's say, scissors. Who's sending the scissors? The aunt, the cousin, the son that they have here in Miami. So You go around in Miami and you see a lot of these stores with curious, to call them somehow, names such as ñoque barato. What are those stores? They're not really selling for a demand that is here in Miami for products that are going to be used in Miami. They are selling for people that are going to buy that stuff, bring it down to Cuba, for their relatives, or for people that will sell them or resell them down there. So you have demand, supply, all fragmented, all invisible, because neither the Cuban government or the US government wants to really acknowledge what's going on. But this is the interesting thing about diasporas. Diasporas, no matter how much states try to control their behavior, control the migration flows or whatever, the people keep doing things at their own pace, in their own way. My wife is an architect, and she once called my attention on something. She said, we architects design, a beautiful building, and then we make the drawings with the sidewalks and everything. But then we find out after the building is inaugurated, perhaps a year later, that people don't use the sidewalks, they walk on the grass, and they make their own path. Does that mean that they're stupid? No, we are, because we're trying to impose on them what they find in their logic that is a shorter path to the place that they're going. So some architects have decided, you know what, I'm not going to impose anything. I'm going to let them use it. And then I'll go after them and see what they have been doing, and then, put the cement over there, right? Well, the same goes for diasporas. No matter how much it doesn't matter how much a state may try to forbid this, forbid that, control this, no, they will find their way. They will find their way to do their thing. Okay, what is a remittance? When we talk about remittances, everybody thinks Western Union, money, right? No, remittance is any sort of resource that this diaspora or that diaspora can send back home. What kind of capitals did we say they have? 3 types, basically. Economic, that would be Western Union, or perhaps a package with clothes or with electrical appliances or whatever. They have human capital and they have social capital. So those resources could also be sent back home, are also potential remittances. Not only the money, but also human knowledge, skills, and knowledge in general, and social context. That can be useful back home, and that can be sent back home. So remittances are not only of one type. There are at least 2 types. Okay, you can call, there are several ways in the academia to name them. Some people say economic and social remittances. In this occasion, I have decided to use a different type of branding. And I have called them material remittances, trying to cover all that is there. People send home, either money or food or medicines, electronics, tools. And they are used as income support when the income in a family back home is not very good or they are unemployed. They use it sometimes for basic investments in a housing, either to improve the house where they are or repair it or buy a new one, in health and in education, in all the costs that are related to send their children to school. And another thing that they use with that, another use that they give to those resources is to start up small businesses most of the time. But there is another type of remittances. Let's call them knowledge remittances. And by knowledge remittances, I am trying to cover two types of capital that are sent back home. The human capital, this is knowledge as such, education that you have acquired outside and you're trying to somehow share that knowledge with the people that you left behind, but also your social contacts. And that can be used for programs of educations and to giving professional skills to people down there, to start and develop new businesses, and also, this is very interesting, for injecting comparative notions in terms of what is democracy or what certain values or whatever. There are very interesting studies, gender studies, about the impact of diasporas that have relocated themselves in Western countries with a liberal, let's say, society, but come from very conservative traditional cultures. And it's very interesting to find out what the impact that just visiting back home and sharing their experiences with their families and friends they have on gender relations in many of these countries that they left. Because sometimes we say information and we believe, well, information is a newspaper. No, information is everything. We are bombarded, surrounded by information. When somebody from a diaspora goes back visiting their families or whatever, everybody's watching. Everybody's watching and how you think, what is your perspective on, I don't know how many issues in life, how do you dress, what kind of books do you read or music do you like, what is your take on what's going on in the country that you're now living in, how do you see the country that you left behind. All that is information. Information that inadvertently each of us transmit back to the folks we left behind. And sometimes it doesn't take for you to travel back home, simply through phone calls, conversations on Skype, letters, etc. And all that information about different lifestyles that exist beyond your society and different ways to organize your society outside of your own country have a lot of impact in certain countries. For example, when the Tunisian revolution started, the rebellion, the so-called Arab Spring, one thing that happened before that was that Tunisian women started to look closely at the way that other Tunisian women who lived abroad were interacting with their husbands when they went back home to visit. When they saw that the husbands would wash dishes, when they saw that the wife would not walk behind the man. And they look at that and say, hey, you know what? There's no way of looking at life, and it's not the end of the world if we change things for the better. So all those things inadvertently represent information that has an impact on social perspectives in the societies that these people left, but they keep in constant interaction with. Now, the difference between knowledge remittances and money remittances is that for money remittances, it only takes Western Union, right? Or something else, something similar. Somebody that would be the carrier of the money would take it here from point X to point Y. For transferring knowledge in a more structural, efficient way, you certainly need some sort of organization in the country of origin where these people used to live, where they were born, and in the country where they are living now. You need, if possible, a sort of educational partnership between an educational institution in the country where the diaspora is now living and the country where they were born, so that they can organize this kind of transfer. The other thing is that not everything could be considered, not every international educational program could be considered properly a knowledge remittance. When you have, for example, an American university or college or even high school, that has some sort of exchange program or partnership with another similar institution, let's say in Colombia. Well, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about programs designed by and implemented by members of the diaspora for their countries. And that's why, again, I think that Miami-Dade College is entering in a very interesting area here, because they have worked a lot, for example, with Haitians. And not everybody speaks Creole in the United States. And they have a lot of faculty and staff and students that are from Haiti. And now they're looking for ways of organizing things in Haiti using, being implemented by the Haitians of the diaspora here. That is a social remittance. That is a knowledge remittance. Now, that would take one educational institution here in the United States to assist in the organization. Let's say that Miami-Dade College will be the Western Union of this sort of knowledge remittance, and you need something down there that will be the recipient and would help disseminate the knowledge in the country. Well, this is an obvious truth. I mean, the best way to go when you have the largest impact is when economic remittances are combined with knowledge. If you want to start up a business, it's not a matter of simply sending money to your friends or to your relatives, because if they don't know how to start a business, and if they have not really made a business plan, if they don't know how to do that, if they don't know how to make an assessment of what kind of market, what kind of demand is out there that they can find a niche to competitively insert themselves into, then it will be a waste. Soon there will be, the business will go bankrupt, they would have to close, and it will be a waste in effort and a sacrifice that didn't work out. So the best way to go ahead is when knowledge is combined with that kind of economic startup. When you can send a little money, perhaps that is enough to start a business, match with some resources down in the country where you're sending it to, and you can also share or find some way to transfer the kind of knowledge that your relatives and friends will need down there. Okay, brain drain. You have heard probably a lot of this. Okay, brain drain is basically a capital flight. What kind of capital? Human capital, knowledge capital. When a country invests a lot of money in training professionals, well, they leave. And there have been a lot of different policies and in reaction to that kind of inevitable almost situation. I think I explained that before. If you invest, let's say, I don't know, how much will be the cost of training a doctor? $20,000, $50,000, $60,000, depending on the country. And then they leave, well, that's a loss for the country. And it's a double loss because the country then would have to import another doctor from abroad and pay in salaries of the North if they want to bring them in. Right? So this is certainly a problem, because you cannot ask somebody to leave their knowledge as you can demand from somebody to leave their belongings. Knowledge travels with the individual. social networks travel with individuals. So when somebody decides to leave, well, that's a loss. No question about it. Now, how big is the impact? Let's take a look at Africa. You have 23,000 qualified professionals emigrating every year, mostly to Europe. That's a loss of 184,000 in training for each one, while Africa pays about $4 billion a year in salaries to foreign experts to bring them in. That's a catch-22 if you want to develop Africa. The United Kingdom, there is an estimate that they are using 31% of their doctors and 13% of their nurses are born overseas, are migrants that came into the UK. In London, the figure goes up to 23% and 47%, respectively. An interesting thing, the African countries have obviously complained about this situation, and there have been some sort of responses. There, for example, the health system, the Ministry of Health in Great Britain, put out a code of conduct for their recruiters, because although the state is the one that supplies the health services in the United Kingdom, they depend on private companies to recruit abroad the professional deficits that they have. So every year, let's say, the health minister would turn to this private company and say, I need 10,000 doctors, or I need 5,000 nurses. And they will go out in the world and look for them and bring them in. And the state will provide them with the right visas and everything so that they can work. Well, after the complaints from Africa that they have, for example, in South Africa, they have a terrible problem with HIV, and that this was depleting their resources to respond. Now they have put out a certain code of conduct for the recruiters, saying you cannot recruit from this country, or that country, because there are certain major crises of health crisis and so on. But obviously, that is a palliative, but it's not going to finally solve the problem. Now, during the Cold War, and I would say that still today, there is a lot of finger-pointing saying, well, this is because the developed countries are diabolic and perverse, and they are egotistical, and they steal our people and so on. Well, you can do that, but that's not going to fix the problem, because that's not, frankly, the only problem. There are lots of reasons of why somebody migrates, including very personal ones. Let's say you're gay and your country is homophobic. Forget about the perverse North stealing people. You're going to go anywhere where you have a more tolerant attitude towards your lifestyle. There are countries where there is a lot of violence. Sometimes it's political, sometimes it's social, criminal, and you want to escape that madness. There are cities in Latin America, for example, Tegucigalpa in Honduras, Caracas in Venezuela, where more people die out of criminal homicides than Marines in Iraq every year. So these are problems that people have in their minds when they migrate. One thing that comes over and over and over again when you interview professionals that has migrated is that they feel that, and professionals in every field, you can be a top-notch scientist, but you can also be a baseball player. And they feel that they have come to a certain point in their careers where there is no possibility of, developing their potential. And they want to migrate to another place where they have that possibility. Well, that is a problem too. And as I said before, one thing that people are learning, states and governments and everybody else is learning little by little, is that, you can understand that something is bad, that has a bad impact. You might try to control it, but unfortunately, people would always find a way to walk in the grass. They would find another path. So, forget about, controlling everything. It won't happen. There are different options. If you are in an authoritarian government and you want a short-term solution, maybe you would say, hey, you know what? Nobody gets out of here. You need a permit to get out of here to travel. And you can also impose a very high fee and compulsory services for many, many years to make it hard for professionals to leave the country. There is another approach, which is democratic, but too long-term. It would take a long way down the road to fix those problems, and you don't really know if they're going to be fixed at the end, or totally fixed. And that is, of course, to address the structural problems of those countries. The unemployment, the poverty, the inequality in income, the creating better conditions for research and development for the labs to produce better, products and so on, so that people will be attracted to the notion of staying in their countries. But that's a long way. And then there is a middle way that people are starting to, I'm not saying it's working, I'm not saying it's the way to the future, I'm just saying because the other two roads are not very satisfactory. Some countries now are approaching the problem of human capital flight with a different approach, and that is brain circulation. Okay, if I am going to be brain drained, I want those guys to come back, or I want their knowledge to come back. How do you do that? Well, there are several ways of doing it. The countries that are pioneering the most interesting experiments are India, China, and Mexico. To some degree, the Dominican Republic. And it's basically facilitating that and giving incentives for those that have left to go back and transfer that knowledge to those to the country that they left behind, to other people. Let's say that you are a professor in economics and you're bright and you have even won some sort of award internationally or whatever. Well, the university of your country of origin is going to say, you know what, if you are ready to come here for 1 week, for a summer course in the university, for postgraduates or whatever, we'll pay everything. And you can even stay another week at our expenses. Bring your family and you can stay here. You're not going to pay the salary that those guys are earning abroad. I know a Cuban economist that has just worked pro bono in the research project that I mentioned before on the Cuban diaspora. That guy went to Costa Rica, gave a lecture, 3 hours, made $18,000. So, but he goes to Cuba and he lectures for free because he feels good about it. He feels good about saying, this is what I learned. This is what the knowledge I've been gaining abroad. Now it's up to you if you want to use it or not. But I give it to you for free. And I am sure that people, not everyone, but many people of other nationalities do the same thing. If they are treated with dignity, if they are treated with respect, if they are treated with consideration, and they are then, stimulated to do that. Well, basically, I think I referred to this. Now, it's impossible and certainly not necessary to have the idea that the diaspora is going to work on programs and educations on almost every possible field of knowledge. It's not like, oh, now we're going to train doctors, and we're going to train engineers, and we're going to train, economists, and whatever. No, you have to, if you want to help back the country, and even if you want to help back those relatives that you left behind, you have to think what kind of effort would have the largest impact in the shortest possible term. And obviously, health is one important thing in many of these countries. Not in others, but in some, health programs are important. And another thing is to help coach the people that would like to start a business of their own and become self-reliant. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean that everybody that is going to start a business is going to become Bill Gates. What we're talking about is somebody that might start a business with the assistance of their relatives abroad and eventually become self-reliant. And even the person that is abroad might participate somehow in the business. I gave you some very, rustic examples of how some Cubans are dealing with this. But in the future, you may go through more complex approaches on how to have a sort of micro transnational business. I know a person, for example, that has a publishing house. Before a publishing house, when we thought about a publishing house, oh my God, a lot of money. Printing and having relations with the authors. Well, all it takes now is a small room, a computer, certain programs, a good telephone system, internet, and social capital. And because you publish, now you have a certain book. You want to publish it. Okay, you can publish it as an e-book, as an electronic book. And if somebody is old-fashioned and said, oh, I don't like electronic books, I like to smell it, I like to touch it, I like to underline it, because otherwise those are not really books, I know a lot of folks that think like that. Well, they have the option of buying it in printed form. But the technology now allows Amazon to print one copy only for you. Before, you would have to make this disbursement of $10,000, $20,000 for maybe 5,000 copies or something like that. If you sell them, hey, good to you. If you didn't, you would have to pay storage. There would be somewhere, with dust in a shelf. Now, you write your book, you publish it electronically, you promote it in the internet, which doesn't cost you money. It's not like, paying an advertising in the New York Times. And if somebody wants to buy the printed, alternative, the printed option, they just tell Amazon, I want the printed. And they have something called printed on demand. And then you ask for that, you pay PayPal, on the internet. Make sure that they don't steal your identity. And that's it. And you get your book. That's not charged to the author. That's not charged to the publishing house. That has to do with the distribution that Amazon makes of it. Now, that little company that I'm talking about has two computers, has a PC and have a Mac, right? And obviously a phone system and the rest. Has a group of flexible workers. They're not on a permanent staff earning a salary at the end of the month. They earn money according to the contracts that come in. If they have a book and they need graphics for the book or whatever, then they get paid for that. Now, these people live everywhere in the world. There are 2 designers, one in Canada, another one in Costa Rica. There are editors that will go through the writing to see if there are any typos or if the style goes smoothly or whatever. You know where they are? In Cuba. Despite the fact that there is little access to internet, these people manage somehow to buy maybe a password in the black market to get connected to the internet for getting email. And this is a very simple thing. They get the text, they check it out, they produce the work and send it back. And they get paid because through Western Union, now you can send remittances back home. So this is a transnational company that is run from a little room in an apartment in Kendall. And it's publishing books from Spain, from the United States, from Cuba, from Costa Rica, from Peru, you name it. So these are the possibilities in this new world. This is a new civilization. I keep saying we're not living through a time of changes, we're living through a change of times. This is a new civilization. The same way that we had the nomads as one civilization, then we have agriculture, that was a different civilization, then we have the Industrial Revolution. This is a new one. It's a new way of looking at things, it's a new way of doing things. And we may like it or not, we may stick to our old habits or not, but this is going to grow and it's going to permeate every society in the world. Like the Industrial Revolution was not born overnight in every country. It was a process that took centuries to expand from England to the rest of the world. And the diasporas are very much part of that, because while we're migrants, isolated communities that did not keep any kind of contact with their countries, with the countries where they were born, now it's different. Who is the president now of the Dominican Republic? A guy that lived more in New York City than in his own country. Who was a candidate for running for elections as a president in Panama? Rubén Blades, a singer that have lived more time in the United States than in Panama. So we have all these new things. We are transnational communities more than national communities. And this is going to keep on growing, and we have a lot of them here in Miami. You work with them, and I would love to know, what do you think? What are your ideas? And how do you think that we can help them out? How do you think that the educational system can help them out? How do you think that Miami-Dade County may help them out and perhaps benefit in the process, economically and otherwise? Thank you.